Hello, everyone. So this time, as per my first mind map where I talked about why I'm doing this, I'm going to try really hard not to say and we'll see how that goes. So an attention agenda was an idea I was working on several months ago, but then kind of dropped it. And the idea was formulating a mental exercise where the main thrust was to act with an intentionality in regards to utilizing one's attention or directing one's attention. So let's take a look. So what an attention agenda would be a tool that helps you, a tool that operates as a mental exercise, helps you reframe, and also helps you get a better grasp of where your attention's going and why it's going that way, and if that's good or bad. And there are four primary things that made me think that it was a good idea to start make a serious attempt to approach attention uh, in a way that would enable one to be act with a higher degree of agency. So the first is what you pay attention to is going to have a profound effect on your experience, and for a lot of people, it's left unexamined entirely. And if you took like a geologist and a botanist to a waterfall in the rainforest, they would see two entirely different things because what they're paying attention to is different. What you pay attention to affects your lived experience in a pretty big way, and if the frame of your focus is on negative things, for example, you'll likely perceive that you're having a negative life even though your life might not objectively be like that. So the first thing is attention's left unexamined, and also what you, the filter through which you perceive your life is going to affect it. Like if you shone a light through a red lens, then everything comes out red. The second is that there are powers with commercialization of everything and just advertising inundating everything. Like it's in airports on the fucking things where you put your stuff. There's like ads on the bottom where you go through security. It's on billboards. It's in every type of app. It's just proliferated, and everything and everyone is trying to apprehend your attention because your attention is valuable. And so, if it's so valuable, perhaps you should look at it as your own resource, which brings us. This is kind of tied in to the attention economy. The apprehension of attention was an idea I read in a book. Let's see, what's the name of that book? I think it was The World Beyond Your Head. I can't remember the author, but the point he makes at the beginning, it's not the main thrust of the book, is that our attention's constantly being apprehended, and we should be wary of that. The attention economy is the idea that during industrialization, we're in an industrial age, right? It's about the production of goods, and then we reach the information age where information was power. I forget who said that. I think it was Francis Bacon. And now we're entering a new age, a new era, where there's so much information, it's so readily accessible, and accessing it is free because you have so many people producing content on things like YouTube. And the only way YouTube makes money, for example, is by apprehending your attention through ads. Anyways, the bottleneck through which ideas are transmitted is not the information itself, it's your ability to pay attention to the information. And so, if your attention is a scarce resource, you should be looking at where you spend it much in the same way you would a budget, which was the idea of the attention agenda initially, was that it was going to be a way to budget your attention. And then the third thing is there's this book, The Mind and the Brain, that I read that made this argument that you don't choose what pops into your head. That's outside of your control. But the book was making the argument that where you can exercise free will is what you choose to focus on in terms of what pops in your attention. So if I say don't think of the pink elephant, you think of the pink elephant, right? But the idea was once you're thinking of the pink elephant, you can choose, you can enact agency, you have power in continuing to think about the pink elephant if you'd like. And so what this means is when you're deciding what you want to pay attention to, one of the things that this has to keep in mind is it's going to be important to not try to negate things as much as direct things. And so we want to have good things pop into our head and then be able to continue focusing on the good things rather than have bad things pop in our head and then try to not focus on them, because that's not really how the human brain works. Anyways, so that's why an attention agenda seems like a reasonable thing. And this entire thing is like a brainstorm for the idea. It's not the idea itself. I still need to flesh out what exactly it looks like. But then what would be the purpose of the attention agenda? So that's like why we need it. But then how would the attention agenda solve the problem? So first, it would establish or declare intent. There's a mental exercise known as an implementation intention, and it's very effective. I forget the studies that were done for it, but the idea is, normally I would just summarize a study, but the idea is that when you say if blank, then blank, right? So if I am exiting here's an example of one I like. If I am exiting my car, then I will take one piece of trash from my car and throw it away. And the idea is if you have that habit, then your car is clean. So it's an if-then type of statement. So it operates on, I think, like 3 points primarily. First is you told yourself that if this, then this. So if you break that, you experience cognitive dissonance, which you're likely to avoid. The second is you are creating an anchor where you're saying if this, then this. So to some, you're creating a deeper association when you read to yourself or say to yourself if this, then this. And so you're more likely to think it's more likely to come into your attention when you're exiting the car that, oh, I need to take up a piece of trash and then do this. And the third thing, what was the third? I knew I identified 3. Cognitive dissonance, anchoring, association. The anchoring is association. I can't remember the third, but it's surprisingly effective. And the idea of how the attention agenda would work is you're kind of making that type of statement, but with your attention. And an agenda sorts what you're going to do throughout the day. And an attention agenda would sort, this is what I'm going to pay attention to throughout the day. And, okay, how do you do that? That's unclear to me. But the purpose is to, act like an implementation intention. Also to give heuristics on how you're going to learn about your attention and also execute your attention. So if you say, if I find myself getting angry, I'll think about my breathing, right? So you're redirecting your focus towards your breathing. You focus on your breathing exercises are great. That would be an example, especially but we still want to keep it positive. So you would say, if it's a pie chart, you would say, I want 30% of my focus to be on this, 70%, or 20 on this, 20 on that, add up to 100. Another reason for having an attention agenda is to increase congruence. I think a lot of people spend a lot of time with things that aren't really them, that just have really high engagement. So there are a lot of things that are really good at getting your attention and keeping your attention, but you don't fundamentally identify them as who you are. For example, watching TV, a lot of people, I've never heard someone say, oh yeah, I'm a TV watcher. When I ask, what do you like to do, what are you about, they're like, TV. That's where I'm at. I'm really good at watching TV, but TV sucks you in and it keeps you engaged. A lot of things are designed not to give you pleasure or to give you satisfaction, but just to keep you engaged so that they can inundate you with advertisement. So, freemium games are a good example. They're just stimulating you to keep engaged so that they can advertise you or get you to pay for their game or pay for bonuses in their game. And then if you pay more attention to your attention and act with intentionally in regards to it, that would hopefully offset certain modes of presentation apprehending your attention more than you would want to given the content. So if there's certain things are just you're going to pay more attention to because there's a lot of flashing lights and bells and whistles, and you actually might not like the content that's being portrayed, but you pay attention because of the bells and whistles. If you're aware that your attention is just being apprehended and what you're paying attention to isn't congruent with your agenda of what you want to focus on, then that will help you break out of that pattern and focus on something different. Now, in my head, I was thinking, you just declare an intent. These are the things I'm going to focus on. This is why I focus on them. But there's probably a better way to do this than just by having a pie chart where I say, this is what I want to focus on. But that's a good start. And once you do that, once I do that, it'll become easier to identify problems and ways forward with it. And I came up with 4 steps initially that I thought would probably be the steps through just doing an initial version of an attention agenda. That's first, you have to clarify your values, because you don't know what you want to pay attention to unless you know what's important to you. So if family is important to you, for example, focusing on the nature of the relationship and communication skills would be important, but a lot of people don't do that. Like Stephen Covey made this 4-quadrant thing, and a lot of people just focus on things that are urgent. So the quadrants are urgent versus not urgent and important versus not important. And a lot of people just focus on things that are urgent, even if they're not particularly important. And communication skills is something that's important, but very rarely urgent. So by clarifying your values and you say you're going to pay attention to communication, you'd be focusing on something that's important but not urgent. And you would be doing that because your attention agenda is helping you increase incongruence with your values, right? After you clarify your values, you declare your intent. You're saying, this is what I'm going to pay attention to. And once you've declared your intent, you start to get the benefits of an implementation intention if it's executed in a way that has the benefits. I wish I could remember the third. I can't. And then number 3, you direct your attention. Right? You might not be able to choose what pops in your head, but you can continue to focus on the things that are congruent with your declaration of intent, and try not to focus on things that aren't, but when you see that you are, you redirect, right? You don't fight. It's like Bruce Lee. You be like water. And then the 4th is reinforcing the program, restructuring the program, trying to figure out what's working, trying to figure out what's not, and then proceed from there. After I did this brainstorm and thought about it a little bit, I'm starting to think this is more important of something for me to do and something to work on. It certainly is interesting. Attention is something I read a ton about last year, and I think people don't pay enough attention to attention in general, given it's a mode through which they process things. But I'm running out of time here. Hopefully, when I listen back over this, I didn't say too many times. Another thing is, I finally thought to use my flash on taking the photo, so that's why my hands aren't casting a shadow. And it took me like 7 videos to think of doing, putting on the flash. Anyways, hope you enjoyed, if anyone's watching.